my play begins at the opening curtain when an innocent walks into prison, and it ends when he knows he's not going to get out. But everything in between is part of that story.
Everything he felt is in the play. I think it's there. That's what makes the play so extraordinary. All of his rage, and he could be, did you ever see John angry? Or talk about things that made him angry?
When the curtains closed, or when the lights went out, and they came back up again, we knew. We really knew. It's happened. It's happened. And they screamed and they applauded and cheered and clapped, and we were all in tears. Couldn't believe it, Jack in New York. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Oh, it was cruel. It was very cruel. It was hard to believe, but it did go on.
Sure.
And there's no lies about what happened in Fortunate Man's Eyes. It was the truth. I saw it.
Yeah.
No, and I'm going to smoke while we're talking anyways. If I cough occasionally, that's me. I say, oh, look at her, she's lived 3/4 of a century and still smoking herself to death. My mother always said that the only thing worth knowing is the truth. My mother was an extraordinarily wise person. And it was one of her sayings, the only thing worth knowing is the truth. And so it is. However difficult. I don't forget the poems or any other kind of writing that I actually had to spend some time composing in my head. So back to the age of 20 on Yonge Street. It was not long I stood before the softly shadowed beckoning door, wherein the wondrous mystery dwelt, to be seen and heard and felt, from which there is no turning. To dance with creatures strangely sweet that make jewels sparkle at my feet, and ride the clouds in heady flight, wrapped in the glamour of the night, from which there is no turning, and on into the shadows, far from bright and sunlit meadows, from birds at dawn and dew-fresh morn, dancing with phantoms, all forlorn, alas, from which there is no turning. And I think there was that feeling that I was going to have to pay some terrible price. I already had met characters, older people in the community, small as it was, or seemed to be in those days in Toronto, that I thought of as phantoms because they didn't live openly, which offended me. I wanted always to live my life openly. And it offended me that they had become these phantom figures that only existed by night. And in some way, even at their best, were partially denying their own freedoms, their own right to freedom, their own identities even. I mean, that they could sometimes turn off the gay side of their character at the sight of a policeman a block away.
Good afternoon, the Fortune Society. Shelby speaking. Don. Oh, you want to speak to Dill? Okay, hold on, please.
This is me at Fortune in about 1970, 72. Is this the picture you want? I got a couple of others. That's the Fortune Society staff. What Fortune has offered is hope for people coming out. When we were making a big dent, then they changed the drug laws to increase the prison population just to build more prisons. Well, in New York State, when Fortune began, it was 13,000. Now it's 77,000. Sometimes it's overwhelming because the numbers are so great. The best theater I'd seen were mirrors of what society was like. Certainly, the plays of Clifford Odets and A Raisin in the Sun and The Crucible, and those are plays that were thoughtful and provocative and reflective of what was happening politically and socially. But they all, there was a distance there. What Fortune and Men's Eyes did is took you right into the evils of the system. This was lifting curtains and allowing us to see something that we'd been denied seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't think I understood all of that at that moment when I read it. I remember reading it. I remember lying in bed reading it and putting it down, going, oh my God. At the end when Smitty says, I'll get back at you all, I said, they've destroyed the kid. He went in for stealing a car. It's his stepfather's car, and they've destroyed him. I knew that. One of my visits back and forth to Toronto, I started going to Toronto a lot to meet with John and about getting the play on and whatnot. And one night he said, I want to take you someplace, and he took me to this little dark bar, and out came this outrageous drag queen singing A Hard Man Is Good to Find.
Well, you can look this wide and wicked world over, but you'll never find another man for me.
I said, that's Queenie. And it was Brandy, and we met. Brandy also came to the opening night in Toronto in full drags. Brandy could fill up a space just by himself. And he captured Queenie. Of course, Brandy was thrilled seeing himself on stage, knew it immediately.
How are you?
Three different people told me where Bleecker Street was because I thought it was
You didn't
further
know where it
south.
was?
I thought it was further south,
You should have asked where the girls are working.
and I got
Well,
Did you see any of them out there?
and I got lost.
Are they working today?
Well, actually, this leads me nicely to the question I wanted to ask you, which is how is it that I wanted to talk to you about Guelph, right? And the first thing I want to ask you is how is it that you ended up at Guelph? What led to that?
What led to it? I
Yeah.
was working Sherbert and Gerard then
Mm-hmm. Tell me about
as a
that.
lady of the evening.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about it? Because I really don't know anything about it.
I was the prettiest boy that ever walked through Riverdale Park.
you were quite handsome.
That was 100 years ago, you know. So it ended up, anyway, I went to Guelph for hustling. There was about 100 and that, but they all did not get along. They all didn't work together. You could pass them on the street and have another. One thing I'll say about the girls never interfered with any of the gay men at all. And Church Street was a noted street. Isabella Street was very well known. But we worked Church Street and Young Street and Spadina was very good. And the Kensington Market, like I say. Like I have a piece in there from on a scandal sheet of me walking down Yonge Street. I was a lot thinner there, but this is going back into the early years. He said, "You ever see this person walking down Yonge Street, you swear she's a movie star," and all this, you know, beautiful, blonde. And then they got my name, Alan Maloney. A lot of guys didn't know I was a guy. There's my picture right in that scandal sheet. So then I had to be very careful, you know, because I've gotten in fights with guys. I've had guys say, "I picked you up, I thought you were a woman," and getting a fist fight in the front seat of the car. The only thing that saved my ass was that little silver revolver.
Dell got me into that, Brandy got me into that. See, they didn't allow real women to work convention shows that were all men, like, you know, Goodyear, tire salesman, staying at the King Edward or the Royal York for convention. But of course, these guys, many of them who were from the States, down there they could have strippers, you see. Up here, the law in Toronto, I mean, Toronto was Toronto, the goody, you know, very, very good, did not allow women to work those convention shows. Brandy was so convincing in a strip. I mean, he had such a feminine body, wonderful skin, legs like Betty Grable. In his youth, he was absolutely gorgeous. Well, I didn't have that. I was, as you could see in them, I was very slim. Not an exciting strip artist. You know, men wanted flesh in those days. So my little bags of birdseed in a flesh, you know, colored bra as the last effort was not an astounding, you know. So I became sort of exotic dancer kind of thing was my, and peel off a couple of gloves, a bolero top and a skirt and finish with a fringe G-string. Look, picture this. We hit Halifax in what's called Navy Week there. If they knew that Al and I were men, they'd have carried that tent down the Midway. We prepared before joining the show, and then after being a while with the show, we had quite long hair. I mean, we kept ourselves absolutely hairless, our bodies. We were young. It's easier to look feminine when you're young. And well, we got away with it. And that was, I think, where something in me said, God, it's good to just be oneself. But it was a community, a very edgy, dangerous community, really, for everybody. Because I think even the careful ones occasionally took chances. Didn't get into trouble as often as, the obvious ones, the police would beat them up all the time. The rouged and masquerade queens were beaten up frequently, taken to the police station and beaten up, taken up alleyways and beaten up. But it was all dangerous. It was all dangerous because, as we know, until 1969, it was all illegal. And you could go to jail, not just for a short time, as I was sent, but it was possible to be sent for very long sentences. It happened that I think the judge in my case, the guys who were testifying against me, he realized these were pool room bullies. And he just got impatient with all of us, and he just, I remember his name was Martin, Magistrate Martin. He just waved his hand and says, "Oh, go to jail for 4 months. You know, I'll go to jail for 4 months." Actually, it was 8 months. 2 guys who were bearing witness. I was found guilty of soliciting both of them. So it was 4 months on each. It was actually 8 months. So, but the charge to run concurrently. So that's why it was 4 months.
Guy got raped in the farm gang.
Okay.
Right out there in the barn.
Right.
And a lot of that shit took place because the screws, that's the guards,
Yeah.
they don't see nothing.
Right. I was going to ask you that, like, with the film, you know how the film of The Fortune of Men's Eyes, there was that scene, the rape scene where...
The rape scene and the guards went
are
right
totally
on
not
smoking and doing anything, yeah.
In 47, when you were there, that
Yeah.
was the way
yes,
it was.
Yes, oh, definitely. Well, who was there to help me with 13 guys?
Yeah.
And the guards, where was he? And I seen guys pass around like a piece of meat.
Yeah.
Guys that could not help themselves,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Really, truthfully.
No, I believe you.
And people that killed themselves, you know. You saw that scene, what they did to that guy. One after the other pumped his ass, you know. And there's nothing he could do about it. I've seen a lot of guys get worked over, a lot of things. They say, what you saw in that movie is exactly what happened. They wanted something, they took it.
Well, I didn't see the movie until I'd been doing research on Canadian and American prisons for a year. And when I saw the movie, I couldn't believe how he was able to capture so many aspects of prison life so simply. But he did it so well, though. I mean, you can see it and be a good writer, and see it and be a bad writer.
Right.
He did it so brilliantly in just one quick scene.
But don't forget, Jack was raped too.
Yeah.
You see, in jail, you're either passive, feminine, and you're going to be treated as a girl, or you're a tough male and you're going to have to fight the other guys to get what you want. In some way, because wasn't the gay community of those early days a kind of prison? And I think that same mentality prevailed, that you have to play, you must play your role, and you better play it right, or, you know, there'll be no place for you.
Jack was more feminine than me, you know.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
Right.
And he did the best he could, but Jack was scared shitless. I was too.
Yeah.
But you couldn't show this. You had to put up some defense. Jack wouldn't put up a defense. He said, I go right along with it. I'll do whatever I gotta do just to get out of here. He said, you can't do that, Jack. Come along. He said, no. Bruce wouldn't do it. Jack, he just wouldn't fight. He wouldn't fight on the street. So you know he's not going to fight in jail, and he would not. He wouldn't. He'd argue. But he couldn't fight. And that's the truth. Which was sad. So he had to pay the consequence.
This guy was always so affectionate to me. He always held my hand when we walked, or put his arm around me. I mean, I was in love with him, you know. And he reciprocated this beautiful warmth and love. And I don't know when I began to figure out that perhaps he was gay, or he told me. Somehow, it didn't matter. It seems like I have always read Fortune in Men's Eyes. I don't ever remember my life without Fortune in Men's Eyes. One of the most moving things that I ever read. And it really was a kind of crusade, because I think the average person in Canada, and I don't think it's one bit different today, has simply no idea, first of all, what homosexuals went through in your day. I mean, it's better now, Jack, you know, we know
Of course
this.
it is.
Yes. And secondly, what prison life is like, whether you were gay or not, didn't matter. And this needed to be shown, certainly to Canadians and finally the whole world.
By the time I got to Fortune, I guess, which was 1963, that I wrote the first draft of Fortune, I guess I was, I was ready. You know, I had to take on what was the most traumatic event up to then in my life, and which I'd really tried to keep hidden from people. And I think I just, it felt like time to do it. Even starting into it, I hadn't realized how far back I had pushed it in my mind. You know, I was startled when the memory started coming, the material that I knew I had to use if I was going to write about it, the jail experience, with any strength, with any meaning. And I really had pushed it back because I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't talk to my friends about that experience. And I certainly didn't when I started studying in the middle 1950s with Dora Mavor-Moore. I sure didn't tell Dora about it or any of the teachers at New Play Society.
I was too scared.
Yeah.
I was scared shitless.
Yeah.
Because those guards, you ever hit that belt downstairs, you're finished. And that was the belt, the strap.
Yeah,
you
the
know what the
paddle.
strap was?
Yeah.
And it was leather.
Yeah, with holes in it.
Yes.
Yeah. It was
It was
horrible.
terrible.
But you
have them tied their hands and held down and everything,
That's
and that
right.
belt hitting the cheeks of their ass,
Yeah.
and the flesh coming off with it,
yeah.
and then when they're finished, to throw salt. No.
They threw salt on you?
Yes.
Everything he felt is in the play. I think it's there. That's what makes the play so extraordinary. All of his rage, and he could be. Did you ever see John angry, or talk about things that what made him angry? I remember he was talking about. It was some prison official talked about the fact that we were at a forum somewhere. I can't even remember where. It may have been in Toronto, it may have been New York. And some prison official said, you have to realize when they were talking about inmates getting beaten, he said, we work hard and we work a full day and sometimes there's a lot of pressure. And John said, I'm a waiter and I get tired. Would I be justified if I pissed in somebody's soup? Had you ever heard that? And I what vivid imagery. And that was John, and I mean, could you not love somebody who would say that?
I'd been fired, you see, from the University Club. I was fired as soon as Lota Dempsey's story about the New York interest in the play came out, because the University Club is mostly judges and lawyers, and all of a sudden they had this waiter that they'd had around for a couple of years, and here was a big article, large article in the Star by, you know, Lota Dempsey was a much-read columnist, and talking about that they had an ex-con and a homosexual serving them lunch and dinner and drinks in the afternoon. They fired me. Judges and lawyers, don't you think it's wonderful?
The first time we actually saw it was opening night in New York. A bunch of us went down. Well, I think it changed everybody's life. How do you describe tension? How do you describe not being able to breathe? Just holding your breath and sitting in your seat and waiting for the lights to go out. And sensing people around you, most of whom you didn't know, and knowing the play, and knowing what they were going to go through.
And the night was packed with critics.
Yes, yes, it was packed with critics. And it began. And I really think my feeling that night in watching these wonderful actors, they were fine. They were the best, weren't they, Jack?
Marvelous.
They simply
Marvelous.
were. They simply were the best.
They gave heart and soul to
And well, the old saying is there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I think that is probably true. But we had our guts kicked in, and we had our eyes opened and our hearts and our minds, and it was electric. You could hear the going on, because it's not pretty always.
But thank God, a lot of laughter over
Lots
those 2 hours.
of laughter.
Marvelous.
But it covered the whole
bursting
range
laughter.
of feelings. When the curtains closed, or the lights went out, and they came back up again, we knew. We really knew. It's happened.
Yeah.
It's happened. And they screamed and they applauded and cheered and clapped, and we were all in tears. It's wonderful.
It was a very exciting night.
A very exciting night. And I was, what a night for this guy. Yeah, what a night for this guy. Couldn't believe it, Jack in New York. Yeah, it's wonderful. Very proud to have been a part of that.
There were no moderate reviews in New York. There were only raves and total condemnation. I mean, some of the reviews were absolutely violent. I mean, they were so like Norman Nadel's, you know, where I can't remember all of it, but the line I remember, because it just made me laugh so hard as soon as I read it, was this play is so obscene that the remark by one of the characters on stage that someone has vomited in the offstage toilet comes like a breath of spring. I thought, oh, this guy hates this play. Jerry Tolmers in the New York Post was an incredible review. It was an absolute rave. He started it by saying, nothing I have seen in many a long, pale month has moved, not since Morant saw it, nothing has moved me so profoundly as Herbert's Fortune in Men's Eyes. And then he just went on, and when he talked about the actors, I cried when I read his review. I thought, how wonderful that somebody would care that much. And he said the performance is brilliant. You know, a wonderful review.
4 or 5 weeks into the play's run, we were asked if, by a group that had a block of tickets, if they could stay for a discussion after the play. That was right up my alley, social commentary about a play that I thought was powerful, making social comment. And we invited the entire audience to stay after the play. And then that's when some guy in the audience said, these characters are all exaggerated. Queenie, Rocky, and Mona are a dime a dozen. And from the back of the room, a guy stood up and said, not if my 20 years count for anything. And all of our ears perked up. And Pat McGarry, the name of the man, said, I've been in Rikers Island, Dannemora, Florida Chain Gang, and San Quentin. And when the lights went on at intermission, I had to look around and make sure I wasn't back on a tier. That's how real it is. So I said, join us on the stage. And Pat became our first speaker, started talking. He brought other ex-cons. We said we would do it every Tuesday night. We invited the audience to stay. A bunch of us sat down one night over coffee after one of the Tuesday night discussions, and I said, you know, we have the nucleus for an organization. We could educate the public, and that was our first mission. The Fortune Society was created to educate the public because we thought it was the 60s, and if the public became educated about the horrors of prison and the difficulties people face coming out, that they would rise up and change the system. Naive. And we took the title of the organization from the play. Obviously, Fortune Society came from Fortune in Men's Eyes, When in Disgrace with Fortune in Men's Eyes. And my office became headquarters. The play opened February 67, so it was November of 67 that we organized the Fortune Society. Probably the major thing that shaped things for me and for the Fortune Society was the Attica prison riot in '71. The inmates asked for people from the outside to come in and act as observers while they were negotiating when we were in the yard in Attica during the negotiations. When the state took over and the inmates were killed, the Fortune Society became the media center of the universe for a week. Every day, every network had cameras posted there. We claimed the bodies of inmates that had no one claiming them. And I had to make a commitment then, and that's when I said, you know, I'm not gonna work on any more shows. I didn't know what I was doing. If I had any idea, I probably would have been scared off. I was young and unafraid and thrilled by the challenge and angry at the system, angry at my own ignorance about the prison system, furious that I didn't know all that was going on. In the original production, when the rape scene was off stage, you hear the screams, you don't see what's happening, but then you hear the water running and the clanging of the cell, and the audience is horrified. The production where the scene is where it's on stage, just everybody's so busy looking at the nude body that it's a handsome kid having sex with another guy. I mean, it's forced, but the impact when he's dragged off against his will, it's unbearable. It's a rape scene.
I will never like the rape on stage. I think it's easy to be graphic. I don't want to see Rocky raping Smitty at the end of the first scene in the play. I don't want to see it happen. I think there's something terrible with Smitty begging Rocky to be his friend, and Rocky said, "Oh, I like you and you're gonna like me too," and he's saying, "Please, Rocky, please," and forced off stage, and that all we hear is a cry, a scream. That's frightening. See, I don't want to see Oedipus put out his eyes. I think that cry backstage and the appearance of this blinded creature, much more terrible. He appears. I wept. I think, as members of the audience, live theater means live theater. We are there as it's happening. And I think we are the other member of the cast. And I don't like that taken away from me.
Many people were offended.
Some stormed out at the Central Library.
Yes,
there were people who stormed
offended.
out even before the first intermission.
They stormed out because they couldn't take it. Yeah, I think you've got to be rather strong to look at this play on stage. I do, really. The people who didn't like it or couldn't handle it, I really do think this is at the root of it. They could not handle seeing such brutality and such raw physicality on stage because they'd never seen anything like it before. I think it was simply because it was upsetting, and we usually don't like things that are upsetting. So it wasn't so much a comment on Jack's play, but an expression of themselves.
No, my only champion really was Nathan Cohen. Cohen said that my work was subversive in the truest sense, that it didn't affirm the lives of people in society. He thought Canadians rather like theater that, assures them that they're fine and doing the right thing. And that I was doing anything but that in my writing. There was great excitement. You could feel it in the house before the curtain went up. There was so much excitement. There was this feeling of expectation. Alain's lady friend told me, she said, "I think we have every left-wing artist in the city is here," she said, "I think, for opening night." And that's probably why, I mean, the ovation at the end was the curtains just kept opening and closing and opening and closing until finally the actors just stood in a row on the stage and they were in tears. They were in tears. They just said there no more pulling of the curtains, and the ovation continued. It was very exciting. I think it was in many ways the most exciting opening. You know, New York was wonderful and very, very satisfying. But there was something about that Paris opening that had so much heart, where I guess so many people cared that the play was there. I think it's why I felt loved in Paris. I think it's why I felt a love and an embracing of me as an artist that I didn't feel always elsewhere. I think that had a lot to do with that, is that they wanted so much for it to happen. And when it happened, they couldn't stop cheering and applauding.
People keep telling me it's lost its power. I don't think so. I think it's still happening. What happens to Smitty happens every day. Talk to the guys here. I mean, they'll tell you. It still happens. Sex and power, violence, a system that pits people against each other, that doesn't give them a chance to confront why they're there.
Let me see those. Let me see those pictures. Can you pass them around if you don't mind looking at them?
Just like the brass
Yes,
rail.
come on, Gomer.
You can't see your tits in front of your face. Come on in, everyone. Where's Madame? There she is. The Empress of all she surveys.
Desmond, how are
But
you?
not wearing a crown.
My God, you haven't changed a bit.
That pretty
You're
little-
almost as big as I am.
No, love.
You wanted
Little face.
ice? There's ice on the
Same
table.
pretty little face that just fooled everybody.
Can we get off the back of the train? That's fabulous.
It's so good to see you.
You too.
Your movie, I seen it when I was in
Wear
jail.
this.
It was
Oh,
fucking
really?
amazing,
Did you go to
man.
Omar the
Amazing.
tent
Well, it was written from
Mother?
personal experience.
Oh, buddy.
12 fan
You know what?
members.
I was in the West Detention when I seen it. It was fucking beautiful, man. It opened my eyes up totally to a whole new world.
Well, you're with the real Queenie now.
He had mentioned that. I didn't believe it. I did not believe
I
it.
would not have been able to create Queenie without
Well, bravo, my friend. Bravo.
the icon.
That's all I have.
Yeah, I believe you were Mona.
I was at 19. I was when I was young.
really.
Yeah. Yeah.
saw it 2 weeks ago on Bravo.
Yeah, ask her. I was the naive Mona. You
Yeah, I
know,
realize.
she had to keep telling me what was what, you know. Yes. Nothing. One girl. Nothing.
I'm listening.
Made good
You put them over there.
Yes, it did. It was well. You had to have the contrast. And even though I was already growing towards Queenie, when I went in, I was Mona. You know. I was-
realize.
Oh, I was so naive. You know. That's all she's growing lately.
You just like to blow.
There goes our diet. Oh, that's gorgeous. And you wrote brandy on it.
All right, everybody.
Lovely.
Everybody together. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Annie. Happy birthday to you.
Yo, bitch.
Come on. Come on, that was my favorite of all.
That's his best.
Ace and
I wanna be loved by you.
Just you and nobody else but you.
Okay, Marilyn.
Is this what we have to look forward to?
By you.
Look at him.
Shit.
I couldn't perspire
Uh-oh.
to anything higher than feel
Desire to make you my own. Bop bop be bop boop boop be doo.
You're not gonna hook those, are you?
Remember the lyrics? Yeah. Wrong.
Say goodnight.
Do you think anybody think we were in the chorus? I think perhaps the biggest change that Fortune might have made was in the way that people in the theater, and perhaps in the public too, looked at homosexuality. Because in the theater, as far as I know, any of the works I know until that time, the characters were very stereotypical. Gay characters were not being dealt with realistically on stage. I don't know of any before Fortune. That, I think, if we're talking simply about the play, that would be where the play has had its strongest influence, because there are many plays since on the subject, and all different, but quite fearless. As some have said, in talking about Fortune in relationship to this subject, that it was 2 years before Stonewall.
I know, but I've been fighting it. But...
So the world, certainly New York, it seems was ready for change, and the change was coming. For some reason, from early childhood, I wanted to become both a man and a woman. Those feelings were always there, that desire to experience much, to not be confined, to not have borders put around my life or my art. And this androgynous desire has made me want to understand the genders. I have always wanted the right to roam as both observer and participant, the wide spectrum of human existence on this planet, and to write about those earthly experiences with the freedom of choice allowed to any other author. If I've had a long time home, it must be Toronto, for I've spent more time in this city, close to family and friends, than anywhere else on earth. Toronto is the city where I began life, and I expect that it is the place where my life will end. If the spirit of my writing travels beyond the borders of my physical world, I would be happy about that. If it will, let my writing go out into the void and find a place to vibrate.
that we all might join in singing, Nana, where are you? What was it?
Down in the valley.
Down in the valley, because of the first night of the opening night of Fortune of Men's Eyes.
And it was Jack who sang.
And it was Jack who sang.
It was the New York opening, and the audience were all chattering, waiting for the opening, and the strings of a voice came through singing Birmingham Jail.
Birmingham Jail,
And
it
it
was
was
St.
Jack. I
John's.
didn't realize till later that it was Jack's voice that they had taken. And the whole house silent.
Down in the valley, valley so low, hang your head over, hear the wind blow, hear the wind blow, dear, hear the wind blow, hang your head over, hear the wind blow. Birmingham jail, Birmingham jail, I send you a letter, Birmingham jail.
I met Jack 40 years ago. Between the Sherburne and the road leading up to Mount Pleasant, he sat in my car, which is my beat-up, charming Volkswagen, and read the Fortune in Men's Eyes after it came back from Bruno Gerussi's workshop down at Stratford. And I was taken by the authenticity and the great power. That play was so strong and so simple and defined and structured, because he was saying through that play, open this fucking door, I'm coming out. Because he was the first to really break through and say, wow, give me some fresh air and some recognition for what I am. And I say, bully Jack.
I'd first like to say that Jack always said that his play Fortune in Men's Eyes is about love. Love that endures and survives misfortune. The title was inspired by Shakespeare's love sonnet, which I would like to read as we close this part of the evening. Fortune and Men's Eyes. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and curse upon myself, look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possess, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, content at least. Yet, in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my soul, like to the lark, at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that then I scorn to share my state with kings.
So that ends our evening of farewell, John Herbert. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Night of wine and entertainment is what Granny said to me.
Wonderful, wonderful.